Hey friends, thanks so much for clicking on this video and watching one of our Catch the Fire London services. We really love giving out all of this content and resourcing the churches. If you would like to sow into our ministry and give online or give through one of our websites or our app, then we really would love to encourage you to do that. There's information on this video for how you can do that, and we would gladly receive your support. Enjoy the sermon.
Before I get cracking, I just wanted to give an official welcome to Abigail Whalen. Yeah. Soon to be Abigail Foreman. As Alistair pointed out, this woman you've heard me speak of many, many times, she's here and she's real. That's how we introduced her this morning. But welcome, it's really good to have you with us, and we're excited to see you guys get married. I love how I was saying this morning how the plane tires were still warm after landing, and Abby had already dragged Alistair to the shops to do some wedding shopping, which I just think is brilliant. I realized I don't really know how to spell whoosh, but I had a good go anyway. But that was what I texted him. I was like, you better get ready, you better get used to a lifestyle of that. Whoop. Well, welcome. If you are visiting here, you guys are really welcome. It's good to have you here. My name's Tom, and I want to speak this evening. It's probably going to be a little bit out of sorts for me, not my usual kind of comfort zone, but I'm going to do my very best to get through tonight without crying. So that's my goal, but let's see what happens. But I just, sick puppies. This is going to be a message where the danger would be to take this as a truth in isolation, but I feel this message tonight is a truth in tension. It's a message of balance. It's often what we find we do is we'll preach something and then we'll realize that not everyone is on that page, and so we'll preach a message that brings balance and tension to that. So it's a truth in tension, but what I felt led to speak on tonight is, what does it look like to be broken in a culture of breakthrough? And I'm really aware that for a church like ours, we're not unique in this, but certainly my experience of church, and I'm sure many of you's experience of church, this church probably more than most would be contending for breakthrough. We really believe in the breakthrough. We really believe in the power of testimony. We absolutely believe, just like I was saying on that video, we absolutely believe our attitude should be, when we hear a testimony, that our attitude should be, well, if God's done it for them, why not for me? I can have that faith raised as I hear someone's stories. I hear what Jesus has done in someone's life for them. I can have my faith raised for my own breakthrough. Yeah? The trouble is sometimes there's a period of waiting between the battle and the breakthrough, yeah? And sometimes that's hard, that waiting. And so this message tonight is for anyone who would consider themselves to be broken. Do we need to change mic? Yeah. That's what that one sounds like. How's this one? Ooh, a little bit more of a silky tone on this one. Wonderful. I just like to slow things down a little bit. Tom Allsop on KPPN coming to you. 96.3. Sometimes between the promise and the palace, there's the process. And so the heart of this message tonight is for anyone who's still not had their breakthrough, for someone who's been pressing in for healing, for someone who's been pressing in for that family breakthrough, for that financial breakthrough, for that psychological breakthrough, whatever it is you need. What do we do? What does it look like for us to be broken in a culture that regularly experiences and regularly celebrates breakthrough? And we had it similarly on Father's Day. I taught on Father's Day morning, and I was saying how sometimes, things like Father's Day are difficult because, we want to celebrate Father's Day, but we know for some people the concept and the topic of fathering is a tough one. In the same way, someone gets pregnant in the church and we want to celebrate that, but we're aware those people who've been contending for months and even years and have not been able to conceive. And how do we manage that tension? What do we do? And so this isn't a message in isolation. This is a message in context. Okay, so two categories of people this evening: the people who've had their breakthrough and the people who are waiting for their breakthrough. And either of you will have something accessible for this evening that you can get hold of. We're going to minister to people who would identify with being in that place of brokenness. They would say, I feel like I'm operating from a place of brokenness. I don't feel like I've had that breakthrough I'm looking for. But for those of us who've had that breakthrough, for those of us who would say life is going well, we have a duty of care to those people that are waiting for that breakthrough. And so that doesn't mean we stop celebrating the breakthrough. Absolutely not. but it means we carry that with sensitivity. We carry that with a culture that says, yes, we've seen this breakthrough, but we're standing with you. We're believing for you to get that breakthrough. And as I was preparing this, I was drawn to Mark 12, the offering of the widow's mite. And that's such a well-known story. And for years, probably, I've had this phrase going through my head of the widow's mite of worship, the widow's mite of worship. And I've had the privilege of, being with Catch the Fire for a number of years now, probably 10 years, and leading worship and going to conferences and leading a church. And, I love the conferences. The conferences are fantastic. We love those. But there's nothing quite like getting to walk a journey with a local congregation. I remember John Arnott, right when we started the church, said, he said, well, it's easy for me. I just fly around the world, and I've got 5 or 6 messages that I just have perfected over the years. He said, but the real glory, he said, the real challenge is in that local church pastor who has to bring something fresh every week, or the local church pastor who has to, walk people through that journey, and I've had the privilege of holding brand new babies, and I've had the privilege of holding the hands of our congregation members as they've gone to be with Jesus. I was messaging, does anyone remember Kelly Warren? Kelly OG as she is now, was John and Carol's worship leader in the early kind of days of the movement, and she's done a lot of soaking stuff, and I messaged her once, and I said, it was your music that was playing in the room when Abby delivered both of my baby girls, and I held them in my arms and looked in their eyes for the first time. And it was your music playing in the room when I held a dear friend's hand as he went to be with Jesus. I was like, bless you. Bless you. And that's the pastoral ministry. That's the heart that this is coming from this evening. And so just my heart would be, whichever camp you find yourself in, know that tonight's relevant. You're either waiting for the breakthrough, or you're either part of the diligent few who are creating this culture where it's safe and it's okay to be broken in a culture that celebrates breakthrough. It's okay to be broken here. Do you know that? You need to hear that. It's okay. And I'm really sorry for any way where we've created a culture where we have in any way made you feel like it's not okay to be broken. Now, we believe it's not okay for you to stay broken. Absolutely, 100%. We believe that Jesus died that you would have life and have it in abundance. The enemy's come, John 10:10, to steal, kill, and destroy. But Jesus came that you would have life and have it in abundance. We absolutely believe, and we're going to contend for you to get everything that he paid for. But we know that sometimes there's a process. And I'm really sorry if we've ever in any way created an environment or a culture where you felt like it's not okay to have problems, where you felt like it's not okay to be broken. And I'm sorry. And what I hope to pull apart tonight is, what does that look like for you to contend with that, to be integrous and to be vulnerable and to be real with where you're at, and for the rest of us to be able to celebrate what God's doing, but also to contend for what you're yet to see. Okay? Okay. The widow's mite of worship. Mark 12:41. Jesus sat down opposite the place where the offerings were put. I love that. Don't you be thinking that Jesus isn't watching the offering. Jesus sat down opposite the place where the offerings were put. I sometimes like to model Jesus and just kind of stand next to the offering and just watch. Where the offerings were put, and watch the crowd putting their money into the temple treasury. Many rich people threw in large amounts. But a poor widow came and put in 2 very small copper coins worth only a few cents, a few pennies. Cents, that was for you, Abigail. Worth only a few pennies. Calling his disciples to him, Jesus said, truly I tell you, this poor widow has put more in the treasury than all the others. They all gave out of their wealth, but she, out of her poverty, put in everything, all that she had to live on. The widow's mite of worship. And so often we've compartmentalized that message to be talking about money. And yes, that's applicable there. But I think there's a richer, deeper meaning. I believe what's being spoken about here by Jesus doesn't pertain just to money. It pertains to the much bigger topic of worship. What does it look like to worship God, even from that place of poverty, even from that place of brokenness? And we are all predisposed as humans to measure the value of actions quantitatively, not qualitatively. That's how we have it as our presupposition, our kind of hardwiring is to measure the actions quantitatively, not qualitatively. What I mean by that is we measure the quantity, we don't measure the quality. And we do that all the time without even realizing it. We're better judges of actions than we are of motives, aren't we? We're very, very good at judging people based on their actions, but we'd like people to judge us on our motives. But God isn't like that. God looks at the inward character. Man looks at the outward appearance, but God looks at the inward appearance. And I remember there's a dear gentleman who's not part of this congregation anymore. Him and his family moved, but he'd been suffering with a debilitating illness for many, many, many years. Many, many, many years. And the illness was debilitating in terms of his energy levels and his ability to even, for him, even to get to church was an ordeal, physically speaking. And I can remember him sharing with me so many times that he felt like he wasn't able to fully engage in worship. And I remember he just sometimes used to sit there on a chair kind of 2/3 of the way back over on the right, because we all like to sit in the same place every week, don't we? If you want to mess with people, sit somewhere different in church. Everyone's like, who are you and why are you in my seat? I love that. And I remember going up to him in worship once, and he was just sat there. And I just remember whispering in his ear, and I was like, do you know, the fact that you got yourself to church today may be the most costly offering of worship that's being offered here tonight. And it broke him. And I think even just someone giving him the permission, even just a leader or even just a congregant saying, do you know what? The fact that you got yourself to church. And that's the problem, is it's so easy for us to assess other people, but also to assess ourselves, don't we? Because we're really good. We judge ourselves by our outtakes and we judge everyone else by their show reel. Remember when I spoke on Picture Perfect and I went on my 45-minute tirade about social media and called it a sermon? Do you remember that one? That was, yeah, okay. I had my little soapbox, and I just went off on one about Facebook and how, we're creating this culture where we present this filtered reality. We present this picture-perfect image of what life is like. And we know ourselves, don't we? We know our outtakes, but we're seeing everyone else's show reel. And it's so easy for us to either think we're doing really well compared to other people or actually beat ourselves up compared to other people, because we see other people worshiping, and we know that we're not there. We know that we're not being exuberant and dancing before the Lord as David danced. Please don't do that. Just read what he actually did when he danced before the Lord. We don't condone that in church. But just go do your homework. Used to, I will dance as David danced. We always used to sing that song. I'm like, if you knew what you were saying, flipping out, you would just be crazy. Never get invited back to church again. God's not like that. He looks at the inward character. And so for us to be able to assess where we're at based on what we're bringing before the Lord, not what we're looking at the person next to us. And so it works two ways, not thinking better of ourselves compared to the person next to us, but not allowing the enemy to beat us up about what we're doing based on the outward appearance, but rather what's going on in the heart. And the King James Version calls these coins mites, and these were the smallest denomination possible. They were the smallest unit of measurement. And of the whole system that they could measure the offering by, this was the smallest possible offering. What she gave was the smallest possible offering. And our mindset is to focus on the word smallest. But what we need is a shift to take our mind off the word smallest and put it onto the word possible. Because we don't measure commitment by what's happening outside. We don't measure commitment next to capacity. Do you see what I mean? We don't. So often we'll measure the offering and we'll say, oh, it was the smallest offering. But God's not interested in the word smallest. He's interested in the word possible. That's the predominant term. That's what gauges the offering as far as God's heart is concerned. The word smallest, we need to get that out of our dictionary, because that's quantitative measurement. The smallest offering. But what he's interested in, what was possible? Qualitative. You with me? Okay, here's an example. Would you rather have 100% of my wealth or 1% of Mark Zuckerberg's wealth? Yeah? That's the difference. Qualitative versus quantitative. Would you rather have 100% of all of my wealth, everything I own, my complete net worth, or would you rather have 1% of his net worth? Let me give you a clue. His net worth is about 70 billion, okay? My net worth is just a little less than that. And if I sold everything I owned, everything I've ever owned, and everything I may ever own, I would still not be scratching 1% of his net worth. And we need to have this shift, because sometimes we're thinking about what it is we're offering, and we need to understand it's about what's possible. God sees what man overlooks. Think about the big gifts in the temple that day. They were surely noticed by people. You know, the offering jars that they put the coins into would have been metal. They would have been like a funnel. And you know, the coins that the Pharisees and the teachers and the wealthy people put in, they would have made a lot of noise going in. They would have made a lot of noise. And those two mites probably didn't make much of a noise at all to the human ear. But they resounded in the heart of God. And that's the point. And when we bring this into the context of worship, I wonder how often we're measuring the quality of our worship by the amount of noise it produces, instead of how much does it resound within the heart of the Lord. The other gifts in the treasury that day, they make a lot of noise. But remember, just like Paul was saying, you know, without love, without this heart, without this purity, it's just a clanging cymbal. It's just noise. And there's a lot of empty noise that gets created in our worship because it's not coming from a place of a pure heart. The widow's faith is also evident in the fact that she gave the last of her money. And I love that. The very last that she had, the very least, the reserves, probably what she was trying to hold back to feed herself. Yet she gave it all, she offered. Think about the other widow we know in Scripture that gave of her last. Remember the story with Elijah, and the woman gives the last bit that she has. And again, it's a similar idea. I was talking in my notes earlier in the week about two widows separated by thousands of years, yet bound together by a simple principle. That they can give the very last, the very least, the very bottom of the pit, kind of the last scraping. It's meager, it's nothing. In the eyes of man, it's nothing. Yet when we put it into the hands of God, it moves the heart of God. And I love that, and that's the kind of house I want to be. That's the kind of house I want to be. And I wrote this, sometimes all we have to offer in worship may seem as insignificant as the widow's mite. But if it's the very best we can bring, despite it coming from a place of brokenness, it will move the heart of God. And I've talked about this before, cost determines value. I've spoken about this concept before. Why don't you, if you've got your Bibles, let's turn to 2 Samuel. I just want to read a quick story that illustrates this beautifully. 2 Samuel 21 to 25. And it's a familiar story, and again, it's something that we've often attributed to the offering of money, but I believe there's a deeper message here again. It's about sacrifice and it's about worship. So 2 Samuel 21. So the context of this story is that there's been some stuff going on in Israel, and David gets told by the prophet to go and offer a sacrifice to the Lord to appease him. Now, obviously, don't get lost in the context of that because we're talking Old Covenant. We don't need to offer sacrifices to appease God. But the context is that he's told to go and offer this sacrifice. And then we pick it up in verse 21. This is the king. So David goes, and there's a threshing floor, and I'm going to get onto that in a minute. And he goes, and there's a king, and the king comes out to him. And when he asks what David wants, David says, I want to offer a sacrifice. I want to bring sacrifices before the Lord. And the king, he says to him, Araunah said, why has my lord the king come to his servant? To buy your threshing floor, David answered, so I can build an altar to the Lord, that the plague on the people may be stopped. Verse 22, Araunah said to David, let my lord the king take whatever he wishes and offer it up. Here are oxen for the burnt offering, and here are threshing sledges and ox yokes for the wood. Your majesty, Araunah, gives all this to the king. Araunah also said to him, may the Lord your God accept you. Verse 24, but the king replied to Araunah, no, I insist on paying you for it. And here's the phrase, I will not sacrifice to the Lord my God burnt offerings that cost me nothing. So David bought the threshing floor and the oxen and paid 50 shekels of silver for them. David built an altar to the Lord there and sacrificed burnt offerings and fellowship offerings. Then the Lord answered his prayer in behalf of the land, and the plague on Israel was stopped. Oh, I love this. There's just so much. Do you know, I don't know if you're finding this experience, but the more and more I read this book, the more and more I find it's reading me. Do you know that? You know, Innie used to say, doesn't he, you know, the more you get into the word, the more the word gets into you. I met a friend this morning on the way out of church. I was just arriving to church about 9:45 this morning, and he was going the other way, and I was like, jokingly said, had enough already, see you later, have a nice week. And he was like, no, I forgot my Bible, I've got to go home and get it. And he just kind of ran off, and I was like, oh, I love this guy, this is amazing. He's come to church, and he's forgotten his Bible, and it's so important to him to have his Bible in church that he's running home to get it. I love that, genuine worship, because it's costly. And so here we see David, no, I will not offer the Lord a sacrifice that's cost me nothing. And this is the context. This is the threshing floor. The context for this whole saga playing out is the threshing floor. And this is a place of work and labor. The threshing floor in this context, this is where the grain would have been brought and it would have been sorted, separating the grain from the chaff. But the threshing floor speaks of a place of work and of labor. And I feel like sometimes, here's the message intention. We've made worship too easy. Not that it's about striving. Please hear me. I'm not talking about striving. But we've made it like, it's just my joy to worship the Lord. And who knows, that's right sometimes, yeah? Sometimes it's just my absolute joy to worship. But other times it's work and it's labor. And that's good. That's really good. Why? Because if it doesn't cost you, it's not worship. And I feel there's a deeper symbolism here of David offering this sacrifice on the threshing floor. The threshing floor where this grain and this chaff would be separated. Do you know how they separated the grain and the chaff? A rhetorical question, I'm going to tell you. By being beaten and by being crushed. That's how you separate the grain from the chaff. And I'm not for 1 minute giving you a theology that says God's going to break you and God's going to crush you. But I do believe that we go through breaking and we go through crushing. I don't believe God causes it, but I believe he absolutely allows it to shape us and to sharpen us and to mold us and to strengthen us. And this process that the grain would get laid down, think about that. The grain has to be laid down first, thrown down almost. And it was crushed. They would allow horses and cows to trample it underfoot. Who can testify to feeling like you've been trampled underfoot? Yeah? Okay, a couple of people. Good. You're going to get some breakthrough in the ministry tonight. And do you know what? If you don't, we're going to be with you anyway. And if you are still at the end of tonight, and even just saying that, it just rolls off the tongue so easily, doesn't it? You're going to get your breakthrough tonight. And I feel like sometimes what we forget to add on the back is, but do you know what? If you don't, Monday morning, we're going to be here for you. And we're going to keep praying for you. And we're going to keep contending for you. And no matter how long it takes, if you get your breakthrough Monday morning or it takes you years, do you know what? Church family, we're in it for the long haul. And bless you if you're here visiting. Be blessed to go back to your house. We believe breakthrough. We've seen it time and time again. We've experienced it time and time again. We've got so many testimonies of God breaking through on our behalf. But we got a whole load of testimonies as well where there's been a little bit of waiting in the middle. As our friend Bishop Joseph says, sometimes it's hell in the hallway. And I feel like we need to balance the message of we believe in breakthrough to also say, do you know what? Amazing that you can worship through your brokenness. I heard someone say once, being on earth is fantastic because it's the only time in the whole of eternity where you get the opportunity to worship God through your pain. You don't get to offer that costly offering in heaven. And I love all the other departments, your outreach and your prophetic and your preaching and your teaching and all your stuff. But worship's the only ministry that's going on through eternity. But you get 70, 80, 90 short years where you get the opportunity to praise him in spite of your pain. And that's what I'm saying tonight. It's about this costly offering that comes even in the face of hardship. Think about this grain, getting crushed, getting beaten. Sometimes they beat it with sticks. Yeah? Whoever feels like they've been beaten by the stick of life. Yeah? Can anyone relate to that? A couple of people are like, yeah, I'd raise my hand, but I'm just too distraught and downtrodden, so I'll just nod my head. We had a prophetic word at the start of our church. We had a prophet come to our church, and sometimes the prophets come and they release amazing words, and we're like, yeah, come on, we want to partner with that. And other times we're like, oh, that feels hard. But every now and then we get this word where we're like, yeah, we want to partner with that. And then we go away and do some research. We're like, whoa, we were way too hasty to partner with that word. Because this prophet came and said, I see your house like the cave of Adullam. David's cave of Adullam, and we're like, yeah, David, he's awesome, the cave of Adullam. And then we went and read about the cave of Adullam. And do you know what? The promise was fantastic because the cave of Adullam was filled with David's mighty men, the giant slayers. But before they became the mighty men, they were destitute, they were discontent, they were downhearted, they were downtrodden, they were discouraged. Think about every negative word that begins with a D, and that was just the list. That was like the roster call. And we're like, yeah, the cave of it. Oh, really? Oh. Can't we bless another church with that? It doesn't sound like the kind of word we want. But I'm so excited. Why? Because, when you follow a giant killer, you become a giant killer. But sometimes you got to face your giants to become a giant killer. And that's what I'm excited about this house, because we've got, even 5 examples tonight of people who came here and they were going through some stuff. They were in some way, shape, or form operating in some form of brokenness, just like all of us. If you believe for a second that our leaders are perfect, just speak to my spouse and she will fill you in and give you all the details and all the ways that I'm not in any way, shape, or form perfect. Spiritually speaking, yes, I have the righteousness of Christ imputed to me. But sometimes my flesh kind of stops that righteousness shining through so much. And these people who were downtrodden and destitute and discouraged and derelict and all the other stuff, they were just a bunch of D's. And yeah, I know, 5 people got that. And do you know what? They had to go through the cave of Adullam before they became David's mighty men. But each downtrodden man that became a mighty man has a story to tell. And he has his own people to have follow him. And when David killed Goliath, he took 5 stones, didn't he? And I believe he took 5 stones because there was Goliath and the 4 brothers. I believe there was 5 of them or something like that. And we read as we carry on with the story that I think David ended up killing 3 of that family. But it was the mighty men that killed the rest. When you follow a giant slayer, you become a giant slayer. But after this grain was crushed and it was beaten and it was downtrodden, they would then scoop it up and they would throw it up in the air. And the wind would blow away all of the chaff. And what fell back down to the ground was the good stuff. And that's the process that some of you are in. You feel like you're being beaten up and downtrodden and beaten with sticks. And sometimes it just feels like you're being tossed around in the wind. But if you've allowed your heart to stay in that place of brokenness before the Lord and you've kept your heart right before the Lord, that wind comes and it blows away all the chaff. And what's left is pleasing and perfect. The threshing floor of Aruna. What I didn't realize when I was doing my study, I never realized this, but this place has a rich history and it has a rich future. In this part of the timeline, in this part of the story, this little corner of Mount Moriah where the threshing floor is. What happened at Mount Moriah historically? What do we see? Yeah, Genesis 22. Abraham and his son Isaac being offered up, that prophetic picture of Jesus being offered up, that prophetic picture of the beloved father allowing his only begotten son to go up the hill carrying the wood on his back, that very hill where thousands of years later Jesus would complete that fully and completely, allowing that father to sacrifice, to be willing to lay down his son, and then the ram being provided. We see that prophetic picture. And then here we see David on that same spot beginning to understand what it looks like to offer the Lord a costly offering of worship and sacrifice. Then a bit later, we see Solomon start to build the temple on that very spot. That very spot is where the temple foundations were laid. And then, again, that very spot, a few hundred years later, where Jesus himself gave himself up as the spotless sacrifice. That rich history. We need to understand that in that place of sacrifice and worship, whether it's in your history of sacrifice and worship, in your present of sacrifice and worship, in your future of sacrifice and worship, there's a place in sacrifice and brokenness that's pleasing to the Lord. It was pleasing to the Lord that Abraham was willing to offer his son. It was pleasing to the Lord that David said, I won't offer the Lord a sacrifice that's cost me nothing. It was pleasing to the Lord that Solomon built the temple at great and vast cost and expense. And it was pleasing to the Lord in the purest sense that Jesus was prepared to lay down his life. Not my will, but your will be done. That threshing floor that Jesus went through, where he allowed himself as a costly offering to be beaten and crushed and trampled underfoot. Remember that quote, forgiveness is the fragrance that the rose crushed under the heel leaves on the heel. Do you remember that? That heel that crushes that rose. And forgiveness is the fragrance that the rose leaves on the heel that crushed it. The place where Jesus was prophesied, the place where David modeled true worship, the place where Jesus modeled the most costly sacrifice, the threshing floor, the place of brokenness, the place of woundedness. Something happened here when David made a decision that he was going to offer the Lord a sacrifice that had cost him. And he laid a foundation in the spiritual that said this place was going to echo that in days to come, in years to come, millennia to come, that place of costly worship. You know, if David had let Araunah offer that sacrifice, offer that stuff to him, it wouldn't have been David's sacrifice, it would have been the king's sacrifice. And I feel like sometimes, and this is going to be hard for some of you to hear, I feel like sometimes, and this is another apology, sometimes as your church family, we're too quick to help you worship. We're too quick to lift your arms, and who knows, there's a time where you need your arms lifted, right? Sometimes, and I've had that time, I remember an amazing time at Soul Survivor once, where they called everyone forward, and we've done this here before, and they said, we're just going to stand with you. We're not going to pray for you. We're not going to worship with you because we feel what you need now is not charity but solidarity. You need to know your family is standing with you. And we've done that here before. I feel like sometimes it's appropriate and it's right to lift people's arms up when they're going through tough stuff. But I feel like sometimes we're too quick to mollycoddle them because what we're losing, I feel, in this modern kind of church movement is the place of lament in worship. You read the Psalms, they're so full of lament. And I feel like we've sometimes lost the ability to connect with God through our brokenness. And we kind of reserve worship for the mountaintop experience, but we've forgotten that we have to go through the valley of weeping to get to the mountaintop. The valley of Baca, you read that bit, right? Or was that the bit we Tipp-X'd over? Remember Tipp-X and highlighters? Oh, the valley of weeping, I'm going to Tipp-X. The mountaintop experience. And I feel like sometimes we've done you a disservice by being too quick to lift your arms for you. Because you haven't developed the spiritual muscles that you need, that even when you're crushed and broken and you're in the depths of despair, that you need to be able to lift your arms in worship. Because if it doesn't cost you, it's not an offering of sacrifice. It's not pleasing to the Lord if it doesn't cost you. It's just empty. It's like the Pharisees that gave out of their wealth, but the thing that attracted Jesus' eyesight and his heart, the thing that moved him was that widow who gave out of her poverty. And sometimes we come to church and we're in a place of spiritual poverty. And you need to know that you crawling to the front and being a dribbling wreck on the floor may just be the most costly offering that's given in that room that evening. And far be it from me to judge where people are at. And I feel like sometimes as leaders, we're quick to do that. And I'm sorry where we've done that. I'm sorry if we've ever done anything that's made you feel like you need to do a certain thing. You need to be right before the Lord. That's your job. You need to have an integrous heart before the Lord and be vulnerable before the Lord, but be honest and be real with where you're at. I love it. I remember, you guys remember Ashley Coleman? And the first ever conference she came on, and she was organizing an event. And she grabbed Hannah, Jack, as was, and myself, and said, can I just chat to you for a second? And then we just went to a little side room and we talked. And she ugly cried. Like, you know the difference between crying, like the crying we do in church and the ugly crying we do at home. And she ugly cried and she just, I'm so overwhelmed and I feel so, and she just had like a cave of Adullam moment. And like outwardly, you would look like she didn't have it together at all. And when she kind of pulled herself around and kind of got her stuff together, I was like, do you know what? That was beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you for trusting me with your heart. Thank you for trusting me enough to be vulnerable before me. That's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Thank you. And in that moment, we cemented a connection. We cemented something. We laid a foundation that even in that place of brokenness and despair, she was able to be real and say, this is what's going on with me. She didn't feel like she had to have it together. Sometimes not helping people to worship is the kindest thing you can do. It kind of feels like a strange thing to say in church. You know, I sent a couple home before church. I sent a couple home. I said, don't come to church tonight. You need a date night. Say that. This verse from Clark, that doesn't apply to the rest of you. He was like, oh, thanks very much. Yeah, I think we can just catch Strictly if we leave now. Wonderful. He who has a religion that costs him nothing has a religion that is worth nothing. Nor will any man esteem the ordinances of God if those ordinances cost him nothing. David knew that it would not be a gift nor a sacrifice unto the Lord if it did not cost him something. Let this one wreck you. He didn't look for the cheapest way possible to please God. I wonder why we've not made space for lament in worship as much. I wonder if we're on some level uncomfortable with it because it leaves us with unanswered questions. Here's some homework for you. Go and do a quick straw poll of the Psalms. Tell me how many are based in lament and how many are based in praise. Tell me David didn't know how to worship properly. Cost determines value. I remember I preached at church once on John 4 many, many years ago. And you'll remember John 2, we got the wedding at Cana. John 3, we got Jesus speaking to Nicodemus in the night. In John 4, we got the story of the woman at the well. And as I was preparing for this, we don't build theologies out of one word. That's not how languages work. That's certainly not how Greek or the Bible works. But there was one word that I saw that arrested me. And every now and then you get this kind of little epiphany moment. And it was when Jesus says to her, go and get your husband. Go find your husband. And she says, sir, I have no husband. And he says, what you have said is quite true. And in the original Greek there, the word is kalos, and it's more than just true. It's more than just good. It's beautiful. And what Jesus said to her in that moment was, the way you have said that is beautiful. I find your honesty to be beautiful. I find your integrity to be beautiful. I find your vulnerability to be beautiful. You know, it would have been so easy when he'd said, go fetch your husband, for her to go, okay, and just go, and we would never see them again. And we've had that experience in church. We've had that experience, particularly in this church, where people have come in and they've realized pretty soon that this isn't the kind of church that's comfortable to be in. We never want to be a comfortable church. Sorry if you're here for a comfortable experience. We want you safe. We never want you comfortable, because if you're comfortable, you're not growing. And if you're looking for somewhere comfortable, there's many, many better places for you to be on a Sunday than here. And we've had some people that have found that just too much, and they've gone, just the heat's turned up and it's just been too much, and they've run. Alistair preached an amazing message this morning that when the fire turns up, we do one of two things. We lean in or we lean back. Just catch it. It was an amazing message about our response to when God starts to do stuff. We've had those people who found this idea of vulnerability too much. We've had people critique and criticize us as leaders for saying, you're too honest. Guilty. Fine. I'm happy with that. If that's the thing you want to criticize our church on, that we're too honest, great, hit me, guilty. I love that. I love the fact that we've created a culture where it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to not be okay. That's what I said to this couple earlier. It's okay to not be okay. And we're going to fight for your not okay to become okay. But in the meantime, it's okay. It's okay. You're okay. You're going to be okay. And it's okay that you're not okay. And I'm really sorry you're not okay. Okay? Okay. So I taught on this idea that Jesus found the vulnerability of the woman at the well just beautiful. And then I remember, and you guys will remember this, Abby and Alistair and Matt and Kate and a few others. The next night I was running our leaders small group. And we sat in the front room at Chaplin Road, if you remember that house. And, they kind of all came expecting it to be like a jolly evening. We're going to ho and woe and bake and shake, and it's going to be great. And amazing. And I was like, guys, I just feel like I need to just bring that word again from last night, John 4. And I just feel like I need to give you guys an opportunity just to be real and vulnerable with where you're at. And you kind of had that moment of like trials or tribulation when you can sense the tension in the room. And then do you know what? Something truly beautiful happened. Just one by one, these leaders, these department heads, these incredible revivalists, these anointed people, these guys that I've given my life to run with, these guys that I've given my life to lead and to be led by simultaneously. Something beautiful happened because one by one, they went around the room and they got beautiful. And they shared about negative body image. They shared about destructive patterns in their lives. They shared about insecurities, and they just got vulnerable. And then the first person went, and everyone's like, like when you're doing a good job of holding it together. And then the next person went, and just the dams broke, and just not a dry eye in the room. Ugly cry everywhere. Snot, tears, the works. And one by one, they just got real, and they just got vulnerable. And it was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And we finished the evening, you remember? And we just all sat there just like a wreck, just like panda eyes, just puffy, just must have looked like a right bunch. Like if anyone had looked at that and been like, that's a senior leadership team of a church, they'd have been like, cripes. You know what? Safest bunch of people in the world. And what they did that day was pleasing to the Lord. As we worshipped him, as we got before him, as we came before him in our brokenness and allowed him to speak into that, something beautiful happened. And that's what Jesus said to the woman at the well. What you've said is beautiful. Why? Because we're not going to offer the Lord a sacrifice that costs us nothing. I'm looking for something genuine. I'm looking for something authentic. I'm looking for something that comes from a place of integrity. And you know what? I may not move the heart of man, but I will always leave this room with my integrity intact. Because it's got to be real. Otherwise, what are we doing? I've been guilty of that, I've been guilty of trying to do stuff that pleases the heart of man. I remember once we had our morning prayer time with our staff, and I can't remember who it was, probably Stu that came in, and he was like, I just feel that this morning you just need to go, and we're just going to break up into different areas of the office and just ask God what you should go and do. Read your Bible or worship or soak or, whatever. And I asked the Holy Spirit, and do you know what he said to me? True story. He's like, why don't you go play that game you like on your phone? And I'm like, what? Okay. Why don't you go play that game you like on your phone? And I did what I've been trained to do. I asked again. I was like, why? Why would you say that? And he said, because I don't want you going to read your Bible if you're just doing it to look good. I don't want you going to worship if you're just doing it because you feel like the staff need to see you be the guy who goes to worship or read his Bible. If you're going to do it genuinely, go do it. But I'd much rather just spend some time with you while you play Candy Crush or whatever it is, Gardenscapes or SimCity or whatever. SimCity, where you can now go to war with other cities. I tell you what, that's a travesty. That's an assault on everything that's good and pleasing about my childhood. He'd much rather play Gardenscapes with you and you retain your integrity and do that before the Lord than something that's empty, that looks pleasing to man but doesn't move the heart of God. Now, I'm not for a second condoning you just sack off your Bible time to play Gardenscapes. Hear me. Just #word, Please don't quote me saying that. The point is the heart. The point is you can offer your two mites, which to man look like nothing. But if that's you giving the best possible thing you can give, if you're coming from a place of brokenness, if you're offering that worship from a place of brokenness, from a broken spirit, from that place of contrition before the Lord, that's the most pleasing thing you can do. It's going to move his heart truly. Matthew 5 verse 3, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. I love this. Psalm 51, this is such a well-known one. My sacrifice, O God, is a broken spirit. A broken and contrite heart, you, God, will not despise. I love this Message version. I learned God worship when my pride was shattered. Heart-shattered lives ready for love don't for a moment escape God's notice. So we're going to create a space to respond. And you know what? I feel like often we create a space to respond where we make it as applicable as possible to as many as possible. And sometimes the broken ones are the ones who are left out and sat there kind of thinking, this doesn't apply to me because I don't feel like I'm there. Well, tonight's your night. Because if you've got it all together here tonight, this ministry time isn't for you. So bless you. Please don't go. Please stay and be engaged in this because this is part of family. But if you're here tonight and you're feeling broken, you're feeling like you've got nothing to give, you're feeling like you're just going through it, you're like the Valley of Baca sounds quite appealing compared to where I feel like I'm at the moment, then we're going to create a space for you to come and to bring something that's pleasing before God. To come and, do you know what? If there's one of you, fantastic. And if anyone else has a problem with us doing the whole ministry time for one person, then trust me, you're in the wrong church. Because that's what family does sometimes. And if you drag yourself to the front and collapse in a heap, great. But you know what? We're not going to have the ministry team pray for you tonight. We're not going to have a big worship moment. We're not going to carry you on the wings of eagles and prop you up and like Moses, lift your arms above the bow. There's a time for that. But I felt what God would have us do tonight is create some space where you can come and just bring something that's pleasing to God. And I don't really care what it looks like. I don't care if it moves the heart of man. I would love it if it didn't move the heart of man. I would love it if every fiber of your being went into moving the heart of God. But you need to understand that if all you've got is 2 mites, 2 coins, 2 pennies to your name, that if you give those 2 pennies with a heart that's full of integrity, with a heart that's vulnerable before the Lord, that's going to be the most pleasing sacrifice that's been offered in this place to date. And that's the kind of worship I want to cultivate. And so for those of you who've had your breakthrough, just sit in your seat and enjoy your breakthrough. But pray for your brothers and sisters right now. Because for some of you, this is going to be hard. For some of you, this is going to be the most costly offering you've offered to date. Sermon over. I'm done. Just come and respond. We will at some point close the service. Please, if you need to leave, be blessed to go and have an amazing week. Be blessed to go and have a broken week, but do it with the Lord. And know that next week when you come back, we're going to pray just as hard for you. You know, the guy who was suffering with the illness for 17 years, you know, the only thing he ever challenged me on? Why did you ever stop praying for me? Because I got to that place where I was embarrassed because I prayed so many times for his breakthrough and it hadn't come. And that perplexed me because we've seen people healed of that same condition. He said, why did you stop praying for me? I was like, I didn't want you to feel bad. I didn't want you to feel like you had to work something up. And his answer was, I couldn't if I tried. I'm knackered. He wasn't looking to please the heart of man. He was just looking for someone to stand with him, sit with him, lay on the floor with him, cry in a heap with him, whatever it may have looked like. He just wanted someone with him. And so if you don't feel like you're able to come, then grab a friend, by all means, have them come up with you, but please don't have them pray for you, don't have them bless you, don't have them lift your arms up, because you need to learn what it looks like to bring whatever you have before God. And so just come as and when you're ready. Steve's going to lead us in a short time of worship. And then I'm sure Abby or Alistair will close the service, but no hype, no bells and whistles, no laser show, no smoke machine, no sharks with lasers. You, your brokenness, and Jesus. So Jesus, would this offering be a costly one? And I bless each and every one of you to get your breakthrough. Lord, let it be tonight. And if your faith is low, then we have enough faith for you as your family. But more precious than the breakthrough is learning to meet him in the midst of brokenness.
To you, praise. so in need of your presence that I bow before you now. And I pour my vow of worship over you. I pour my vow of worship over you. I give to you a humble sacrifice. I pour out my heart and I give you my life. I offer up to you, oh Lord, this costly gift. And with absolute abandon now my love I confess. I give to you a humble sacrifice. I pour out my love and I give you my life. I offer up to you, oh my Lord, this costly gift. With absolute abandon now, this love I confess. May you be a pleasing fragrance that I bring to you, oh my Lord. I am so in need of your presence that I bow before you now. May you be a pleasing fragrance that I bring to you, oh my Lord. And I am so in need of your presence that I bow before you now. And I pour my vow of worship over you. I pour my vow of worship over you. 'Cause when I thought I lost me, you knew where I left me. You reintroduced me to your love. You picked up all my pieces, put me back together. You are the defender of my heart. When I thought I lost me, you knew where I left me. You reintroduced me to your love. You picked up all my pieces, put me back together. You are the defender of my heart. Hallelujah, you have saved me. So much better this way. Hallelujah, great defender. So much better your way. And hallelujah, you have saved me. So much better this way. And hallelujah, great defender, so much better this way.
So here's the deal. Your brokenness is welcome anytime in this house. And our end of the bargain is we'll always do our best to create a space where you can bring your brokenness and offer it as worship. And your end of the bargain is to be real. To not pretend you're okay when you're not okay. Get some people walking the journey with you. Get in a fire group, get under some accountability, get some people that you can be vulnerable with, some people that are going to tell you it's beautiful when you share where you're really at. And in return, we're going to create an atmosphere where it's always safe to bring whatever you have in your pocket and offer it to the Lord as a pleasing sacrifice. So Holy Spirit, would you come and just minister to these guys here, just wherever they're at. Holy Spirit, would you meet them there? So bless you. We're going to end the service here. If you need to go, please be blessed to leave. If you want to stay, please be blessed to stay. We're going to have a soft close. If you are new here, we'd love to connect with you. We'd love to meet you, tell you how you can get plugged into church life. There's a whole ton of stuff going on. Website ctfl.life. You can find out there how to get connected. If you're new and you would like us to stand with you for healing, if you need a breakthrough, we would love to pray with you. And then we'd love to create some space where you can just receive from God. So if that's you, come and find us.
As you go before I know that you've even gone to win my war. You come back with a head up.
Part of this culture and this context is small groups where we can create families where people can be real. And so if you are sat in your seat and you're operating from a place of breakthrough, I would love to ask you to prayerfully consider leading a small group. We're in great need of more small group leaders, and all you need to do to be able to lead a small group is put a kettle on and have a space where people can come and be real in your front room. We're going to train you and equip you to do all the rest, but that's the base requirement. Opposable thumbs and a house. So if you fit that criteria and you have a heart to be a mum or a dad to people that need you to just let them be real, then do come and speak to me, speak to Alistair. We'd love to speak to you more about that.
You go before I know that you've even gone to win my war. Your love becomes my greatest defense. It leads me from the dry wilderness, and all I did was praise. All I did was worship. And all I did was bow down. All I did was stay still. Hallelujah, you have saved me. So much better your way. Hallelujah, great defender. So much better your way. Hallelujah, you much better your way. Hallelujah, you have saved me so much better